My name is Natalie Williams, and I am 28 years old. As I drove toward my childhood home, my palms were sweating against the steering wheel. 5 years of absence, and now I was returning with colonel insignia hidden in my bag. My family had always dismissed my military career as nothing. Little did they know that tomorrow, at my father's company event, everything would change. I parked in the driveway, took a deep breath, and stepped out. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, if you have ever been underestimated by family, this story will show you exactly how sweet vindication can taste. The moment I walked through the front door of my childhood home, I was struck by how nothing had changed. The same faded family photos lined the hallway, the same worn furniture occupied the living room, and the same judgment hung in the air. My small-town Montana upbringing was preserved like a time capsule, right down to the outdated curtains my mother Diana had always refused to replace. "Natalie, you made it," my mother called from the kitchen, not bothering to come greet me. Her voice carried the same subtle disappointment it always had when addressing me instead of my brother Gregory. I set my bag down and wandered through the house, trailing my fingers along familiar surfaces. My father Albert had worked at Pinnacle Defense Systems for over 30 years, climbing from engineer to senior executive through dedication and networking. Our family revolved around his career success and the shadow it cast for my brother to follow. "Your brother will be here soon," my mother informed me as I entered the kitchen. "He just got promoted again, you know. Senior project manager now." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, the kind she never used when discussing my career. "That is great," I replied, the words feeling mechanical after years of practice. "I will have to congratulate him." My mother continued preparing dinner, chattering about Gregory and his wife Megan, their new house, and all the corporate accomplishments that made them the golden children of our family. Not once did she ask about my life or career. I excused myself and headed upstairs to my old bedroom. Like everything else, it remained frozen in time. Cheerleading trophies from high school, academic awards, and college acceptance letters still decorated the walls and shelves. My parents had preserved everything from before I made my disappointing choice to join ROTC instead of pursuing a business degree. What they did not display were any acknowledgments of my military career. No photos of my commissioning ceremony. No shadow boxes of achieved ranks. No newspaper clippings about deployments or promotions. In their minds, I had wasted my potential the moment I chose service over corporate success. I sat on my childhood bed, running my hand over the familiar quilt, remembering the night I told them about my ROTC scholarship. My father had stared at me with such disappointment that I almost changed my mind. "The military is for people without options, Natalie," he had said. "You are smarter than that." Even then, they had been grooming Gregory to follow in my father's footsteps at Pinnacle. My brother had eagerly embraced the plan, thriving on the favoritism and using every opportunity to remind me how much more successful he would be. I opened my suitcase and carefully removed the garment bag containing my dress uniform. Tomorrow, Pinnacle Defense Systems would be hosting their annual leadership conference, and my father had mentioned that the CEO, Shannon Murphy, would be visiting their branch. What my family did not know was that I was now the military liaison for the $1.2 billion defense contract between the Army and Pinnacle, a position I had earned through years of dedicated service and expertise. My finger traced over the silver eagle insignia of my colonel rank, achieved faster than almost anyone in my division's history. At 28, I was one of the youngest colonels in the modern Army, specializing in cybersecurity defense systems, the very technology Pinnacle was contracted to develop. I carefully hung up my uniform in the closet, making sure it was hidden behind some old clothes. For tonight, I would endure one more family dinner of dismissal and condescension. Tomorrow would be different. The doorbell rang, announcing Gregory's arrival. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders like I was heading into battle, and went downstairs to face my family. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered, constricted by the oversized personalities gathered around the table. My brother Gregory had arrived with his wife Megan, both dressed in expensive business casual attire that screamed corporate success. My cousin Tiffany had also been invited, which was no surprise. She worked as a finance director at a prestigious bank and was often held up as another example of what I should have aspired to be. "Natalie, you remember Tiffany," my mother said, as if we had not grown up together. "She just closed a multi-million-dollar deal for her bank." "Hi, Tiffany," I said, giving her a genuine smile. Unlike my immediate family, Tiffany had always been kind to me, even if she did not understand my choices. "It is good to see you, Nat," she replied, giving me a quick hug. "Been way too long." The initial conversation remained pleasant as we served ourselves from the dishes my mother had prepared. My father Albert sat at the head of the table, occasionally checking his phone for work emails despite my mother's disapproving glances. "So, Dad," Gregory began, predictably steering the conversation toward himself, "I wanted to tell you about the new project I am heading up. Shannon personally selected me to lead the team." My father beamed with pride. "That is my boy. Shannon Murphy does not hand out responsibilities lightly. You must have really impressed her." "Well," Gregory continued, shooting me a glance to make sure I was paying attention, "it is the same project you have been working on for years. Shannon says my fresh perspective might help move things along faster." I bit my tongue, knowing that the project was actually the Army contract I was now overseeing. If only they knew how much authority I actually had over the success or failure of Gregory's new position. My mother Diana immediately jumped in, eager to showcase Gregory's achievement. "Tell them about the staff you are managing now, dear." Gregory puffed up. 12 direct reports, including 2 senior engineers who have been with the company for over 20 years. They were not too happy about reporting to someone younger, but they got over it when they saw my results. "That is wonderful," my mother cooed, then turned to me with a thin smile. "Natalie, how is your job going? Are you still at the same rank?" The dismissive way she said job rather than career was not lost on me. "Things are going well," I replied simply, not willing to reveal my promotion yet. "Still a captain or whatever?" my father asked vaguely, not even knowing the correct progression of military ranks. "Something like that," I answered, taking a bite of mashed potatoes to avoid elaborating. "You know," my mother interjected, "Tiffany just bought a beautiful new condo downtown. 3 bedrooms with a gorgeous view of the mountains." Tiffany looked uncomfortable at being used as a comparison point again. "It is really not that impressive," she said graciously. "Just good timing in the market." "Still," my mother continued, "it is nice to see young people establishing themselves properly, building equity instead of moving around every few years." The dig at my military lifestyle was clear. I had lived in 4 different states and 2 countries in the last 8 years, something my mother considered unsettled and immature. "Speaking of tomorrow," my father said, thankfully changing the subject, "the CEO is coming to review our branch. It is a big deal. Shannon Murphy does not visit regional offices often." "I have my presentation all ready," Gregory boasted. "Shannon already emailed me personally to say she is looking forward to my innovation proposal." "Is there anything special planned for the visit?" I asked innocently. My father nodded. "Full staff meeting, project reviews, and a special announcement about the military contract. Some colonel is supposed to come as the Pentagon liaison, but I doubt they will send someone that high-ranking. Probably just some major who will be impressed by our operation." I suppressed a smile. "That sounds interesting." "Not really," Gregory scoffed. "Military types never understand the business side of things. They just follow orders and check boxes." "Gregory," Tiffany said with a frown, "that is not fair." But my brother was on a roll now. "Come on. We all know the truth. The military is a fallback career. People who cannot cut it in the real competitive world hide behind ranks and regulations." My mother nodded in agreement. "We always knew you were so bright, Natalie. That is why it was such a disappointment when you chose that path." "What exactly do you think I do in the Army?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Push papers, follow protocols," my father shrugged. "Important work, sure, but not exactly challenging for someone with your potential." "You will never be anything there," Gregory laughed. 10 years from now, You'll still be taking orders while I am running my own division." The words stung despite my accomplishments. Years of therapy had helped me recognize that my family's approval should not matter anymore, but old wounds ran deep. "I think Natalie made a choice that works for her." Tiffany attempted to defend me. "A waste is what it is." My mother sighed dramatically. "All that potential. Remember how all your teachers said you could run a company someday?" I pushed food around my plate as they continued dissecting my supposed failures and missed opportunities. The conversation moved on to Gregory's upcoming vacation to Hawaii, Megan's promotion at her law firm, and Tiffany's investment portfolio. No one asked about my recent deployment or the specialized training I had completed. As dessert was served, my father mentioned again how important tomorrow's meeting was for his career. 28 years I have put into Pinnacle. This contract could be what finally gets me to vice president. I nodded sympathetically, knowing that tomorrow would change everything, though not in the way he expected. Later that night, I retreated to my childhood bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling. From down the hall, I could hear my parents still praising Gregory's achievements. "He really is exceptional," my mother was saying. "Shannon would be foolish not to see his potential for senior leadership." I closed my eyes, fingers tracing the colonel insignia I had slipped from my bag. Tomorrow could not come soon enough. Sleep evaded me as I stared at the glow in the dark stars still stuck to my ceiling, relics from a childhood when my potential had been measured differently. Back then, before Gregory started working at Pinnacle, before my decision to join the ROTC, my parents had seen something in me. But that changed the moment I chose a different path than the one they had planned. I remembered sitting at this same dining table during my sophomore year of college, ROTC brochure in hand, explaining how the program would pay for my education and provide a career path I found meaningful. "The military?" my father had asked, his face contorting as if I had suggested becoming a street performer. "That is for people who cannot get real jobs, Natalie." "It is a real job," I had countered. "And it is what I want." My mother had exchanged worried glances with my father. "But what about law school? Or business? You always said you wanted to work at Pinnacle someday."
No, they had always said that.
I had merely nodded along, trying to be the daughter they wanted. When I stood my ground, the subtle undermining began. My achievements in ROTC went unacknowledged. My commissioning as a second lieutenant was attended only by Tiffany, who drove 6 hours to be there when my parents suddenly had unavoidable work commitments. My father had Gregory's promotion to junior analyst at Pinnacle framed, while my military portrait remained in a drawer. Yet despite their dismissal, my career flourished. My aptitude for systems analysis and cybersecurity had been recognized early. By 23, I had been promoted to captain and assigned to a specialized unit developing defensive protocols against emerging cyber threats. By 26, I had reached major, after leading a task force that identified and neutralized a sophisticated attack on military infrastructure, saving countless classified documents and potentially lives. Captain Eleanor Grant had been my first true mentor, seeing potential in me that my family refused to acknowledge. "Williams," she had said after a particularly grueling training exercise, "you think differently than the others. That is going to take you places." Under her guidance, I learned to trust my instincts and leverage my unique perspective. When a routine security audit revealed patterns others missed, Eleanor encouraged me to pursue it further. The investigation ultimately uncovered a coordinated attempt to breach multiple defense systems. The operation I subsequently led earned me an early promotion to lieutenant colonel and put me on the Pentagon's radar. Eleanor, by then a brigadier general, had personally recommended me for the Pinnacle liaison position. "They are developing next-generation security protocols," she had explained. "We need someone who understands both the technical and strategic implications. Someone who can speak the language of both military and corporate worlds." When she pinned the silver eagle of full colonel to my uniform just 3 weeks ago, the ceremony was attended by generals and Pentagon officials, but not my family. I had not even told them about the promotion. Years of dismissal had taught me to stop seeking their approval. "Colonel Williams," General Eleanor had said afterward, "I hope you realize what an achievement this is. youngest colonel in the Cyber Command's history. I did realize it. But tomorrow would be the first time my family would understand what I had truly accomplished. The Pinnacle contract was massive. $1.2 billion for developing advanced cybersecurity systems for military applications. As liaison, I had final approval on all major decisions, technical specifications, and budget allocations. In the most literal sense, I would be overseeing my father's and brother's work. The irony was almost too perfect. For years, they had belittled my career choice, and now I held significant influence over the project that could determine their professional futures. I got out of bed and removed my uniform from the garment bag. The midnight blue fabric was immaculate, brass buttons gleaming even in the dim light of my childhood bedroom. I ran my fingers over the rows of ribbons and medals, each representing missions, achievements, and sacrifices my family knew nothing about. The Silver Eagle insignia caught the light as I turned the uniform jacket in my hands. I remember my father once saying, "Ranks do not mean anything in the real world, Natalie. Out here, it is about what you can do, not what title they give you." He would learn tomorrow that in my world, this rank was earned through proving exactly what I could do, repeatedly, under pressure, and against overwhelming odds. I meticulously inspected every detail of my uniform, checking for loose threads or spots that needed attention. The ritual calmed me, the familiar routine grounding me against the emotional turbulence of being home. By the time dawn broke, I had moved past the hurt of yesterday's dinner. The uniform hung ready, my hair was precisely pinned according to regulation, and my resolve was firm. Today, Colonel Natalie Williams would report for duty, not the disappointing daughter they thought they knew. I dressed with practiced efficiency, each button and pin placed with precision. The person in the mirror reflected confidence, authority, and purpose. No trace remained of the insecure girl who had once desperately sought her parents' approval. As I pinned the colonel insignia to my collar, I reminded myself that this moment was not about revenge. It was about finally allowing my family to see me as I truly was, for better or worse. If they could not accept my success on my terms, that would be their loss, not mine. I checked my watch, a gift from General Eleanor. It was time. The company event would begin in an hour, and I needed to arrive early to coordinate with the security team. Downstairs, I heard my parents and Gregory preparing to leave separately. They had no idea I would be joining them, much less in what capacity. I waited until I heard their cars pull away before heading downstairs and out to my own vehicle. The drive to Pinnacle Defense Systems took less than 15 minutes. I used the time to center myself, reviewing key points about the contract I would be discussing today. This was not just about showing my family who I had become. It was about ensuring a critical national security project received the oversight it required. As I pulled into the reserved parking spot marked Military Liaison, I straightened my uniform one last time. The weight of responsibility settled comfortably on my shoulders, far more natural than the weight of family expectations ever had. It was time to step into the role I had earned, regardless of who might be watching. The Pinnacle Defense Systems headquarters loomed before me, a gleaming monument to corporate success and military-industrial partnership. The glass and steel structure housed some of the most advanced technology development in the country, including the cybersecurity systems I was now responsible for overseeing. Security at the entrance was tight, as expected for a facility with multiple classified projects. I approached the guard station, where two security officers straightened immediately upon noticing my uniform and rank. "Good morning, Colonel," the first guard said, instantly recognizing the Silver Eagle on my shoulder. "May I see your identification, please?" I presented my military ID and project authorization. "Colonel Natalie Williams, Pentagon Liaison for Project Aegis." The guard's eyes widened slightly as he processed my clearance. "Yes, ma'am. You are expected in the main conference room. Would you like an escort?" "That will not be necessary. I know the way." In truth, I had studied the building layout extensively before arriving. As I walked through the security checkpoint, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Military officers of my rank rarely visited regional offices, and certainly not ones as young as me. Employees stopped mid-conversation as I passed, some nodding respectfully, others clearly curious about my presence. The elevator carried me to the executive floor, where the day's meetings would take place. As the doors opened, I came face to face with my brother Gregory, who was reviewing notes on a tablet. His eyes flicked up casually, then widened in shock as he registered both my presence and my uniform. "Natalie, what are you doing here? And why are you wearing that?" Confusion and the beginning traces of alarm crossed his face as he noticed the colonel insignia. "Good morning, Gregory," I replied professionally. "I am here for the project review." Before he could respond, my father turned the corner, engaged in conversation with two other executives. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to concern in rapid succession. "Natalie, what is going on? Why are you in uniform?" He glanced around nervously, clearly worried about what his colleagues might think. "Dad," I acknowledged with a nod. "I was just about to head into the conference room to prepare. The meeting starts in 20 minutes, correct?" The executives with my father were staring at my rank insignia with growing recognition. One of them, Barbara Jenkins from Legal According to her name badge, stepped forward. "Colonel, it is an honor to have you here. We were not aware you would be attending in person today." My father's face paled. "Colonel? Natalie, what is this about?" I maintained my professional demeanor, aware of the growing audience in the hallway. "I believe CEO Murphy will explain everything during the meeting. If you will excuse me." As I walked toward the conference room, I could hear the whispered conversations erupting behind me. Years of military training had taught me to maintain composure under pressure, but I could not deny the small satisfaction I felt at their shock. The conference room was already being prepared by staff, setting up presentation materials and refreshments for the high-level meeting. The young woman arranging water pitchers nearly dropped one when she saw me enter.
"Oh, Colonel."
"We were not told you would be here in person. Do you need anything special set up?" "Everything looks fine, thank you," I replied, taking a seat at the position reserved for the military liaison. Over the next 15 minutes, various executives and team leaders filtered into the room. Many introduced themselves to me with a deference that contrasted sharply with how my family had treated me just the previous evening. Several mentioned being surprised to meet me in person, as they had expected a video conference. My father and brother entered the room together, both looking unsettled. They took seats far from me, occasionally shooting confused glances in my direction. I focused on reviewing my notes, not giving them the satisfaction of an explanation before the meeting officially began. At precisely 9 a.m., the door opened and CEO Shannon Murphy entered, flanked by her executive team. Shannon was a formidable presence, known for her direct approach and strategic brilliance. She had led Pinnacle to become one of the top defense contractors in the nation. The room fell silent as she scanned the attendees, her gaze stopping when it reached me. A smile of recognition spread across her face as she changed direction, heading straight for my position. "Colonel Williams," she said warmly, extending her hand. "What an unexpected pleasure to have you here in person. I thought we were scheduled for a video conference." I stood and shook her hand firmly. I was in town visiting family and thought this would be a good opportunity to review the project in person. Shannon nodded appreciatively.
Exzellent Initiative.
"Your presence will certainly make today's discussions more productive." She turned to address the room, her voice carrying authority. "For those who may not be aware, Colonel Williams is our Pentagon liaison for Project Aegis. She will be overseeing the implementation of the new security protocols and has final approval authority for all technical specifications." I could see my father's jaw literally drop from across the room. Gregory was staring at me as if seeing a stranger. "Good morning, Colonel," Shannon continued with a respectful nod. "I look forward to your insights today." The meeting began with project updates from various team leaders. Each presenter addressed their comments to both Shannon and me, acknowledging my authority over the military aspects of the project. When technical questions arose about integration with existing defense systems, all eyes turned to me for answers. I provided detailed analysis and clear directives, drawing on my years of specialized experience. With each comment I made, I could see my father and brother exchanging incredulous looks, their worldview visibly crumbling. When it came time for Gregory to present his portion, his normally confident voice wavered. As the team lead for user interface integration, I have developed a streamlined approach too. He faltered as he caught my eye. Please continue, Mr. Williams. I encouraged professionally, as if he were any other presenter and not my brother who had laughed at my career choice just 12 hours earlier. Gregory stumbled through his presentation, clearly thrown by my presence and position. When he finished, I asked several pointed technical questions that exposed gaps in his planning, not out of malice, but because the project demanded thorough scrutiny. These are important considerations that need to be addressed before we can approve this phase, I concluded. Please submit revised specifications by the end of the week. My father watched this exchange with a stunned expression, witnessing his son being held accountable by his daughter, the daughter he had dismissed for years as wasting her potential. As the meeting progressed, it became increasingly clear to everyone in the room that I possessed an expertise and authority that commanded respect. My family was seeing for the first time what my colleagues and superiors in the military had recognized years ago. By the time Shannon closed the meeting 3 hours later, the power dynamics had been irrevocably altered. Colonel Williams will remain on site through tomorrow to conduct security assessments, she announced. I expect everyone to provide her with whatever information and access she requires. This project is critical to national security and to Pinnacle's future. As the room cleared, Shannon approached me again. Colonel, I must say your reputation is well-deserved. General Grant speaks highly of you, but seeing you in action today confirms everything I have heard. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father hovering nearby, clearly eager to speak with me, but uncertain how to approach. The moment of revelation had arrived, and there would be no going back. The conference room slowly emptied, leaving only my family and a few senior executives who were engaged in conversation with Shannon Murphy. My father hovered awkwardly at the edge of the group, visibly struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Gregory stood beside him, his earlier confidence replaced by confusion and dawning realization. Shannon gestured me over to join her small circle, unaware of the family drama unfolding. Colonel Williams, let me introduce you properly to our senior team. Some of them you may already know from project documentation, but it is always better to connect in person. I nodded professionally and joined her. She placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a gesture of collegial respect that would have been unthinkable between a CEO and a junior team member. Everyone, this is Colonel Natalie Williams, the Pentagon's primary liaison for Project Aegis. Colonel Williams has been instrumental in developing the security frameworks that will form the backbone of our system. The Senior Vice President of Engineering, a man named Thomas Bailey, extended his hand. Colonel, your reputation precedes you. Your paper on adaptive countermeasures against quantum computing threats was revolutionary. We have implemented several of your recommendations already. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I appreciate the practical application of theoretical work, I replied, acutely aware of my father and brother watching this exchange with disbelief. Shannon continued the introductions until she reached my father. And of course, you must know Albert Williams, our Director of Regional Operations. Albert has been with Pinnacle for nearly 3 decades. An awkward silence fell as everyone registered our shared last name. Shannon looked between us, realization dawning on her face. Williams, are you related? Before I could answer diplomatically, my father stepped forward. She is my daughter, he said, his voice a complex mixture of confusion and a new emotion I had never heard from him before. Was it respect? Your daughter? Shannon looked genuinely surprised. Albert, you never mentioned your daughter, was Colonel Williams. The Colonel Williams who has been overseeing our biggest military contract. My father struggled to find words. I did not. I was not aware of Natalie's current position. Shannon turned to me with a questioning look. I maintained my professional demeanor despite the personal undercurrents. My family and I have not had much opportunity to discuss my career progression, I explained simply. Gregory, unable to contain himself any longer, stepped forward. You cannot be serious. You are the colonel everyone has been talking about? The one with final approval on the entire project. Yes, I confirmed. I have been overseeing Project Aegis for the past 6 months, since my promotion to full colonel. 6 months, my father repeated, his voice hollow. You have been a colonel for 6 months and never told us? Shannon looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized she had stumbled into family tension. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Colonel Williams, perhaps you would like to explain your role directly to the team? Since you are here in person, we should take full advantage. I nodded gratefully for the professional redirect. Of course. Project Aegis represents a $1.2 billion investment in next-generation cybersecurity infrastructure. As the military liaison, my role is to ensure that all developments meet Pentagon specifications and security requirements. I moved to the front of the room and activated the presentation screen, displaying the project overview. As I spoke, I could see the expressions on the executives' faces shift from curiosity to genuine respect. My detailed knowledge of both the technical aspects and strategic implications demonstrated exactly why I held my position. All major design decisions, budget allocations, and implementation strategies require my approval before proceeding. I continued, the words landing heavily in the room. This includes staffing decisions for key positions. My brother paled at this last point, undoubtedly remembering his boast about leading a new team on the project. Shannon nodded approvingly as I finished my overview. As you can all see, we are fortunate to have Colonel Williams guiding this project. Her expertise is unmatched, and her authority in this matter is absolute. The executives nodded in agreement, several making notes. My father sat rigid in his chair, his expression unreadable. In fact, Shannon continued, Colonel Williams will be conducting performance evaluations of all team leads over the next 2 days to assess our progress and resource allocation. Gregory's face went from pale to ashen. Just last night, he had laughed about my career amounting to nothing, and now I would be evaluating his performance. As the meeting concluded, Shannon pulled me aside. Colonel, I had no idea Albert was your father. This must be quite a proud moment for your family. I offered a diplomatic smile. It is certainly a significant moment. Well, they should be extremely proud. Your work has been exceptional. I have told Albert many times how fortunate we are to have such a strong military partner on this project. My father overheard this exchange as he approached, his expression now a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be dawning regret. Natalie, he began, struggling with how to address me in this context. We need to talk. Of course, I replied professionally. I have a brief meeting with the security team, then I can meet you in your office at 11 a.m. He nodded mutely, unused to taking scheduling directions from me. As the executives filed out, I could hear them murmuring about the unexpected revelation. Did you know Albert's daughter was Colonel Williams? No wonder she rose so quickly, with connections like that. Actually, I heard she refused any family connections, did it all on merit. The last comment, from Thomas Bailey, carried clearly across the room, causing my father to stop in his tracks. The implication was clear. I had achieved my position not because of my family connections, but despite their lack of support. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the opportunity for long overdue understanding. At precisely 11 a.m., I knocked on the door of my father's office. Through the glass partition, I could see not just my father, but my mother and brother as well. Someone must have called my mother to come to the office after the morning's revelations. Enter, my father called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I stepped inside, still in full uniform, and closed the door behind me. My mother Diana sat perched on the edge of a chair, her expression fluctuating between confusion and something that looked almost like fear. Gregory stood by the window, arms crossed defensively across his chest. Please sit down, my father offered, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Thank you, but I prefer to stand, I replied, automatically adopting the Addie's position, hands clasped behind my back. An uncomfortable silence filled the room until my father finally spoke. Why did you not tell us? All this time we thought. You thought what, Dad? I asked calmly. That I was wasting my potential? That I would never amount to anything in the military? That I was hiding from real competition? I quoted their various dismissals over the years without raising my voice. "We did not know," my mother interjected. "How could we know if you never told us?" "I sent you invitations to every promotion ceremony," I replied. "I called after each new assignment. I emailed articles when my work was declassified enough to be recognized publicly." "But a colonel," my father said, still struggling with the concept. That is a very high rank." "Yes," I confirmed. "It is equivalent to a corporate vice president, approximately." This comparison landed exactly as I expected, causing both my father and brother to sit up straighter. "And you have authority over our contract?" Gregory asked, his tone accusatory. "Is that why you came home now? To ambush us and embarrass me in front of Shannon?" "I came home because it has been 5 years, and despite everything, you are my family," I replied evenly. The timing with the contract review was coincidental, though admittedly convenient. "Convenient," my father repeated bitterly. "You show up at my workplace in uniform without warning. Do you have any idea how this looks? People will think I used nepotism to get my daughter assigned to our project." I had to laugh at that. "Dad, I have spent my entire career avoiding any connection to your company precisely to prevent that perception. General Grant assigned me to this project because of my expertise in adaptive cybersecurity systems and my record with similar implementations." "General Grant?" my mother asked. "My mentor and commanding officer," I explained. "She has been what you could have been all these years. Supportive, challenging when necessary, proud of my accomplishments." The words hit home, and I saw my mother flinch. "So this was all about showing us up?" Gregory demanded, "making us look foolish for not believing in your military career?" "No," I said firmly. "This was about doing my job. The job I have trained for, sacrificed for, and excelled at. The fact that you never took it seriously is not my responsibility." My father stood up, anger finally breaking through his shock. "You could have warned us. You deliberately let us go on believing you were still some junior officer pushing papers somewhere. Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "When have any of you ever shown genuine interest in my career? Last night at dinner, not one of you asked me a single substantial question about my work or life. It was all about Gregory's promotion and Tiffany's condo." The truth of this statement hung in the air between us. "We always wanted what was best for you," my mother said weakly. "No," I corrected her. "You wanted what you thought was best for me. You wanted me to follow the path you understood and valued. When I chose differently, you decided my choice was invalid, rather than considering that I might know what was right for my own life." My father sank back into his chair, the anger deflating. "Your brother followed the plan. He is doing well." "I am happy for Gregory," I said sincerely. "But that was never going to be my path. I needed something different." Gregory uncrossed his arms, his defensive posture softening slightly. "All these years, we thought you were just stuck, going nowhere." "I know what you thought," I replied. "You made it abundantly clear every time we spoke. You will never be anything in the military." "Those were your exact words last night, Greg." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I did not know." "You never asked," I pointed out. "None of you did." My mother stood up suddenly, her expression shifting. "Well, now we know. And, of course, we are very proud. Very proud indeed. I always told your father that the military was a respectable career." The revisionist history was so typical that I almost smiled. "Mom, please do not do that. Do not pretend you have been supportive all along. It diminishes any chance of honest reconciliation." Her mouth opened and closed, and used to being directly contradicted. "Natalie," my father said, using my name instead of my rank for the first time since the meeting, "what do you want from us now? An apology? Public recognition?" "What I have always wanted," I replied simply. "Respect for my choices. Acknowledgement that my path, while different from what you planned, has value and meaning. That is all I have ever asked for." The room fell silent again, as they absorbed my words. Finally, my father stood and approached me. For a moment, I thought he might try to hug me, but he stopped and extended his hand formally instead. "Colonel Williams," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology. A significant one. I failed to recognize your achievements and dismissed your career out of ignorance and prejudice. I was wrong." The formality of his approach was so characteristic of him, yet the admission was entirely new. I accepted his handshake. "Thank you, Dad." "I still do not understand everything about what you do," he continued, "but I would like to learn if you are willing to teach me." It was more than I had expected, and I felt something tight inside my chest begin to loosen. "I would like that." My mother approached next, less comfortable with direct apologies. "We should have come to your ceremonies," she said instead. I would have liked to see you recognized." It was as close to an apology as she could manage at the moment, and I accepted it with a nod. Gregory remained by the window, clearly struggling internally. Finally, he spoke. "So you outranked me. By a lot." "This is not a competition, Greg," I said. "It always has been, though," he replied with surprising insight. "Mom and Dad set us up that way from the beginning. I just had the advantage of following the path they already approved of." It was the most honest thing my brother had said to me in years. We chose different paths. Both have value. He nodded slowly. "For what it is worth, what I saw in that meeting today, I could never do what you do. The technical knowledge alone, not to mention the leadership presence. It was impressive, not really impressive." Coming from Gregory, this was equivalent to a full prostration and apology. I felt the last of my defensive walls begin to lower. "Thank you." My father cleared his throat. "Shannon wants to have dinner tonight. With all of us, now that she knows we are family. She is quite impressed with you, Natalie." "I know," I said simply, allowing myself a small smile. "Of course you know," my father replied, shaking his head with what looked like newfound respect. "You probably know more about this company's operations than I do at this point. Only the classified parts," I said, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh from him, perhaps the first we had shared in years. The tension in the room had transformed into something different, something tentative but hopeful. There was damage to repair, years of dismissal and hurt to work through, but for the first time, I felt that my family was seeing me, truly seeing me. "I have another meeting to get to," I said, glancing at my watch. "But I would be happy to join you all for dinner with Shannon tonight." As I turned to leave, my mother called out, "Natalie, we..." She struggled to find the words. "I know, Mom," I said gently. "One step at a time." I closed the door behind me, leaving my family to process the new reality. Their daughter, their sister, was not nothing after all. She was Colonel Natalie Williams, and she had earned every inch of the respect she now commanded. 6 months later, I hosted my family for dinner at my Washington, D.C. apartment. The spacious 2-bedroom condo overlooking the Potomac was a far cry from my childhood home in Montana, but it had become my sanctuary over the past few years. The changes in our family dynamic were still evolving, but progress was undeniable. My father Albert arrived first, carrying a framed news article about the successful implementation of Project Aegis and my role in it. He had it professionally mounted and had been proudly displaying it in his office. "I thought you might want a copy for your wall as well," he said, somewhat shyly. The article featured a photo of me in uniform alongside General Eleanor and Shannon Murphy at the project launch.
"Thank you, Dad."
"That is thoughtful," I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. 6 months ago, he would have considered such military recognition irrelevant. My mother Diana arrived with a homemade apple pie, my childhood favorite. Her attempts at connecting were still awkward, but sincere. She had stopped making comparisons between me and Gregory or Tiffany, instead asking genuine questions about my work, at least the unclassified parts. "Your apartment is lovely, Natalie," she commented, looking around at the minimalist but elegant decor. "So neat and organized. Military precision," I joked, and she actually laughed instead of using it as an opportunity to criticize my career choice. Gregory and Megan arrived last, bringing an expensive bottle of wine. The most surprising transformation had been in my brother. After the initial shock wore off, He had approached me with genuine curiosity about my work and career path. So, he began as we sat in the living room before dinner. I implemented those security protocols you suggested last month. The team thought I was a genius for coming up with them. I raised an eyebrow. Did you give credit where it was due? He grinned sheepishly. Eventually. After enjoying the praise for about 5 minutes. But seriously, the implementation has been smooth. The client is impressed. Good work, I said sincerely. Your team executes well. This simple professional acknowledgement meant more to him now than any familial platitude ever had. He had started seeing me as a colleague worthy of respect, not just his little sister. My father, who had been examining the military awards displayed modestly on my bookshelf, turned to me. I read that article about the cyber attack you helped prevent last year. I did not understand all the technical details, but it sounded significant. I confirmed. We caught it early, which was fortunate. Lives were at stake, he asked, beginning to grasp the importance of my work. Potentially, yes. Infrastructure security affects everyone. He nodded thoughtfully. I always thought military service was about physical combat. I never considered the cyber battlefield. Most people do not, I acknowledged. That is partly why we can be effective. Enemies do not always see us coming. The doorbell rang, and I excused myself to answer it. General Eleanor Grant stood in the hallway, her uniform as impeccable as always despite her off-duty status. Colonel Williams, she greeted me with a warm smile. General. I returned the greeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. I had invited Eleanor to dinner partly because she was in town for meetings, but also because I wanted my family to meet the woman who had believed in me when they had not. Everyone, I announced as we returned to the living room. This is Brigadier General Eleanor Grant, my commanding officer and mentor. Eleanor, this is my family. My father stood immediately, extending his hand with the respect he would show any high-ranking corporate executive. General Grant, it is an honor. I understand we have you to thank for recognizing Natalie's potential. Eleanor shook his hand firmly. The potential was always there, Mr. Williams. I simply provided the opportunities for it to flourish. My mother bustled forward. General, please make yourself comfortable. Dinner is almost ready. As we moved to the dining table, the conversation flowed more naturally than any family gathering I could remember. Eleanor shared stories about military life that helped my parents understand the world I inhabited, while carefully avoiding classified details. Natalie designed a simulation program that is now standard training for all cybersecurity personnel, she told them over the main course. Her approach reduced successful breach attempts in training scenarios by 63%. I watched my parents absorb this information, saw them truly hearing about my accomplishments perhaps for the first time. We did not know, my mother said quietly. All these years, we did not know what you were really doing. You never asked, I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored those words 6 months ago. But now you know, and that is what matters. After dinner, Gregory helped me clear the dishes while our parents continued talking with Eleanor. You know, he said quietly, I spent years thinking I was ahead of you in the game of life. Getting promotions, climbing the corporate ladder, making connections. But you were playing an entirely different game at a much higher level. It was never a competition, Greg, I reminded him. I know that now, he acknowledged. And I am sorry for making it one. These moments of genuine connection would have seemed impossible during that painful family dinner 6 months ago. The healing was not complete, perhaps would never be fully complete, but it was real progress. Later, as we enjoyed coffee and my mother's apple pie, my father raised his glass in a toast. To Colonel Natalie Williams, he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of pride, who proved that following your own path can lead to extraordinary places. We may have been slow to see it, but we could not be prouder now. I raised my glass along with the others, feeling a sense of peace I had not experienced in my childhood home for many years. The validation I had once desperately sought from my family no longer defined me, but their recognition was still healing. In the end, it was never about proving them wrong. It was about becoming who I was meant to be, whether they approved or not. That they had finally come to respect my choices was not the victory. The victory had been in making those choices for myself all along.
So, what about you?
Have you ever had your achievements dismissed by people who should have supported you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and triumph. Remember to share with anyone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the best validation comes from proving yourself on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and remember, your path is valid even when others fail to see its value.